pet loss grief being disenfranchised. That's a word that maybe not every listener has heard before. It's a disenfranchised grief, which means it's a type of grief that isn't really openly acknowledged or socially mourned or publicly supported. Other types of disenfranchised grief can include things like miscarriages or even divorces or suicides. So there's a lot of grief that we call disenfranchised. And it means our culture isn't ready to step up and support it as a significant loss. So that's why we get those comments, oh, it's just a dog, only a cat, and it does make people feel minimized, isolated, and embarrassed.
Hi everyone, welcome to MythBarkers, where we make dog parenting easier by sniffing out the facts and debunking dog tales.
Yena, I do have to tell you, I'm a little nervous, anxious. There's a lot of feelings going on right now, but I'm generally very excited. We're talking with a very special guest today about a sensitive subject, so I'm just going to put that out there right now. Today's episode of MythBarkers is all about losing a pet, the grief that comes with that experience, what that's like. I understand it's a very difficult topic for a lot of people, and it may bring up a lot of emotions with some listeners, but we do hope that you will give today's episode a listen. We decided to do this episode because it's something that's very important and relevant to both Yena and I.
Yeah, so this was a difficult topic for both Laura and I. My soul dog Bodhi passed away in November, so it's been a few months, and I've been with Bodhi since he was 6 months old, and I've been with him every single day. I've really based my entire life around him, my entire career, the people I met, and the loss of my soul dog really impacted me in a way that was so foreign to me. I couldn't recognize myself. I didn't know how I was reacting or what I was supposed to do. I felt really lost. I felt angry. I felt all of this energy, and I didn't know where to place it. I didn't know how to talk about it. I didn't know what was the right way to grieve, or if there was a right way to grieve. So navigating that was really difficult for me, and I self-isolated for a while. And there was a part of that stage where I sort of wanted to pretend it didn't happen. Like, I would refuse to look at his bed, I would refuse to look at his bowls, and it just really, really broke me. And I'm so happy that there are resources out there where, someone who is an expert can help you navigate these really difficult stages. And the reason why we're talking about this is because it's almost like we are not allowed to grieve them the way we want to because society deems they're just pets. Get over it. And so that was really difficult to share with other people and to really navigate myself. And so even though it's really hard for us to talk about this today, I wanted this episode to empower others to really look after that part of themselves and free to feel how they feel during this stage. So yeah, it's gonna be difficult, but I'm excited to delve into the subject and to create safe spaces where we can. Because if you've experienced a pet loss, I know how horrible and how life-altering that can feel. I feel that way too.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And Yena, I haven't talked about this on the show yet, but I also lost one of my pups a few weeks ago. Actually, my dog Penny, she was my soul dog, and my best friend. Penny passed away the day before we launched MythBarkers.
Yeah.
And it was unexpected. In the middle of the night, she had a seizure. I was home alone with my pack of 6, and it just happened out of the blue. And to make a long story short, a traumatic experience. She passed. It was so shocking and unexpected, and I'm still dealing with it because it's very raw. But MythBarkers has been such a light and has been the one thing that has kept me going and kept me excited and positive and feeling really good. And maybe it also is a distraction too, because when I'm in something, I throw myself into it and I'm fully into it. But, all of these raw emotions, having this happen, it feels like it was all meant to be. So knowing that this is something that's so relevant to both Yena and I, and also sharing it with friends and family, what's been the most helpful experience is hearing about others and their loss. And it just became abundantly clear that this is something that we had to talk about at MythBarker. So we are so excited for our guests today, and we do this show and MythBarkers in general in honor of Bodhi and Penny and all of our beloved dogs and pets that we've lost. We hope we can continue to learn together, grow together. MythBarkers is about making pet parenting easier and bringing all of us together, our pet parents and guardians, with the love and understanding that's deserved. So, Yena, if you want to introduce our guests, we'll get right going.
Yes, we have an incredible guest today. We have a double certified pet loss grief counselor who's certified end of life animal companion doula and trained pet chaplain. She works with individuals and families before, during, and after the loss of their beloved animal companions. On her Instagram account, Honoring Our Animals, she shares daily original content and tips about pet loss grief, which are a unique blend of tools, compassions, and telling it like it is. She works closely with animal care workers, veterinary professionals, and other pet industry brands on grief training and awareness. Please join us in welcoming the amazing Beth Bigler to MythBarkers.
Hi, Beth.
Thank you so much for
Hello.
joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be here and cannot think of a better way to be honoring Bodhi and Penny's legacy than having this amazing space for us to share. So thanks to the two of you, and thank you to Bodhi and Penny.
Yeah,
Thank
this
you.
is such a great way to remember them. And right before this segment, Laura and I were talking about how this show really helped us move forward because this was the way we honored them, to continue to talk about them, to continue to help other people grieve with us.
Yeah, that's an unexpected gift that happens sometimes when we've been through a soul-shattering loss. We hope that at some point, when we are ready, when we are able, we can use the knowledge, the depth of pain that we have experienced, and we can use our own compassion to help others through. And sometimes that's on an individual level. You're doing it on a podcast. I'm doing it in grief counseling. And I really believe that if each of us who's gone through this can turn and be the light for someone else in this, it will go a long way. So thank you for doing that and being that.
I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you for speaking with us today. Before we get into debunking our myth, Beth, what made you get into this field? Because this is a very particular field, and honestly, not something before my experience that I knew even was, a focus in a profession.
Well, it's a niche. It's a deep niche, and frankly, there's not very many people who do this work. For me, I did not grow up as a little kid saying I want to become a pet loss grief counselor. That was not my dream. I was kind of an artsy kid. I was a writer, and I ended up having a long and wonderful career in Hollywood as a film and television executive. So I did not start out this way. But in my life came my soulmate cat, Arnie. That's right, Arnie's a cat. My dog friends. Here he is. Here's my soulmate, Arnie. There he is.
Arnie's beautiful.
Thank you. And Arnie's amazing. He's the most wonderful relationship of my life, the best gift of my life, my rock, my anchor. He was there through so many things when he was Earthside. And I am who I am today because of him. And unfortunately, when Arnie was 11 years old, he got a really crappy prognosis, bad diagnosis on a rare kind of cancer. And I got a 30-day prognosis. I didn't know what to do. In fact, I was on the floor of my apartment for days. I couldn't even get up. I was devastated. And frankly, I didn't want to live in a world without Arnie. But I knew that if he was going to die, that I wanted to try to give him a good death. I wanted to try to step up. And I figured, hey, I'm in Los Angeles. There's got to be help for this somewhere here. I looked around, had a lot of trouble even finding anyone. I did finally find my pet loss grief counselor who had been doing this for many, many decades. And she was incredible. And she took me on right away for anticipatory grief counseling, which is something I do now for helping people when they get a diagnosis or when we know that kind of the end is coming. And I started working with her, and it was like transformative work. I've done a lot of different kinds of therapy. I've done everything. And I was learning things about myself, about my relationship with Arnie. And I felt like, okay, this is going to be really hard, but I can do it. I can show up for him. At the same time, we mounted a fight for his life. We did sort of an experimental chemo because frankly, with cats and chemo, most things are kind of, we don't know if it's going to work or not.
Yeah.
We did kind of a Hail Mary and we got a remission, which was like a miracle at the time. It was incredible. And so my plan at that point was, Arnie's going to live like 10 more years. Life is good. Just keep brushing his teeth. Everything will get him into his 20s. And we were at just a regular checkup after his remission, and there was a woman in the waiting room there who didn't have an animal with her. And then there was another couple across the way with a dog. And this was also, it was a specialty hospital and an emergency clinic. And the dog was there for the ER, and he had a seizure. It was very scary. And the vet techs came to get the dog and took the dog back. And this woman next to me just burst into tears. And this was kind of my aha moment, the calling moment. And I just like stood up and I went over to her and I took her hand and I said, "What brings you in today?" And she told me that her 3-year-old cat had ingested some lily water. And for those of you who don't know, lilies are fatal for cats. It's very toxic. And they were thinking they were going to have to euthanize her cat. And she was so guilty. She was so angry. She was in such shock. And something happened in that moment where I just knew how to support her. I knew how to talk to her. And in fact, my husband came and took Arnie for his regular appointment, and I stayed with her the rest of the day. I stayed for the euthanasia, spent time with her after, made sure she got home okay. And when I walked out of there, I knew my life had changed. I said, oh my gosh, like, this is it. This is what I want to do with my life. And then my second thought was like, well, I have a career going. I work in entertainment. Maybe when I retire, it'll be like a side hustle. That was like my thinking, because I just thought, well, I don't know how to fit this in. About 6 months after that, we did a 1-year remission checkup for Arnie, and he had clean blood work and clean ultrasounds. Everything looked great. But 2 weeks later, he started exhibiting symptoms. I rushed him in right away, and a completely different cancer that we couldn't have seen even a couple weeks before had come in, taken over his whole body. There was nothing we could do. There was no way we could fight it. And within just a few days, I had to make a really tough euthanasia decision. It was a total blindside, totally unexpected. It was also the last day of the first trimester of my pregnancy, which made it an extra charged day. And when that happened, I sat back and said to myself, I don't think I want to delay doing this work any longer. I want to start helping people right away. Arnie and I can do this together. It's our mission. It's our legacy. Arnie always showed up for me when things were tough. Arnie was there for me in the worst times, and I thought he and I can now go be there for people. So obviously I had some of my own healing and grieving and mourning to do, but shortly thereafter I did all my training certifications, opened up my practice, and now have helped hundreds and hundreds of grieving guardians, both on the anticipatory side of things and the post-loss side of things. I help people individually, I help people in small groups, and obviously have my amazing Instagram community as well. And so that is how Arnie and I are helping others.
It's remarkable how Arnie has inspired these changes and the impact that our soul animals have on our lives really every day, because this morning I woke up and I was thinking about Bodhi, and I immediately started crying. This is a testament to the fact that grief isn't linear. It really doesn't look the same for anybody. And I think it is so beautiful that Arnie brought this out in you, and through that, so many people that you help are going to get that support from you and Arnie. So the ripple effect and the sort of expansion of love is really beautiful to witness.
It's like it's all meant to be in this weird divine way, and you could never have seen it, but wow.
I ask him sometimes, I say, did you know that this is how it would go? And I think he did. I think he did. And I wish we could have had 10 more Earthside years, of course. I would trade it all, frankly. I would trade all of this to have him here. He'd be going on 19 now. But at the same time, I think this was all part of his good work that continues. And so I can't really argue with it. I'm going with his mission.
And you guys are doing it together.
Mm-hmm.
I have to tell you, just meeting you, you have such a light about you. And for talking about such a heavy, deep, serious topic, just your light and your energy is so infectious. So thank you for all the work that you do. To jump right in, I'm sure we've all heard the statement of it's just a dog, or a dog is just a pet. It seems so condescending and minimizing of the loss. Too often it seems like grief is something that's just so easily dismissed, or there's a timetable on it. I think parents having experienced that loss, because of how it's perceived and the stigma, we feel shame, we feel embarrassed, we feel like we have to isolate, as Yena said, and keep it all to ourselves. And I think we really just want to talk about why that is harmful and how to help others who are either not only going through it or have gone through it, but how can we also guide and support others who want to help people in their lives? So both sides of that, right? I think we'd love to talk about that today. Can you talk to us about pet loss grief, the symptoms? What are those, and how do we handle that? Just kind of as a big picture, and then we can get into more specifics.
For sure. And I want to honor what you just said there about pet loss grief being disenfranchised. That's a word that maybe not every listener has heard before. It's a disenfranchised grief, which means it's a type of grief that isn't really openly acknowledged or socially mourned or publicly supported. Other types of disenfranchised grief can include things like miscarriages or even divorces or suicides. There's a lot of grief that we call disenfranchised. And it means our culture isn't ready to step up and support it as a significant loss. So that's why we get those comments, oh, it's just a dog, only a cat, and it does make people feel minimized, isolated, and embarrassed. We don't get bereavement days off work. No one's bringing you a casserole when your dog dies. It's the kind of thing where we don't even have a cultural way to hold it. And in the larger picture, grief and death are very hard in our culture. Many people are kind of grief illiterate and death illiterate, and they don't know what to do about even human loss. We
Yeah.
don't like loss. We like gain. We like acquiring. We don't like to talk about loss unless we're losing weight, right? So we want to also just acknowledge, in general, grief is really hard, and then this type of grief is extra hard. So it's a great question. How do we support grievers, and how do we support ourselves, and what kind of symptoms are we expecting? So you want to start with symptoms,
Yeah,
kind of what a lot
let's-
of people experience?
Yes,
Yeah.
that'd be great.
Yeah, of course. Well, I always like to remind people that grief impacts in many, many different ways. So we are going to have physical symptoms. We're going to have emotional feelings. We're going to have cognitive things going on in our minds, and our brain is extremely affected. We're going to have kind of social impact in our grieving, and for many people, spiritual impact. So it's not just one kind of thing. And of course, in the beginning, as both of you have unfortunately recently experienced, you have a lot of this kind of shock or disbelief, maybe that discombobulation feeling confused and foggy in your brain. Grief brain fog is real.
Yeah.
And then many physical symptoms. People experience everything ranging from heart palpitations or chest tightness to stomach upset, GI, headaches, extreme fatigue, many other things. So your physical things are happening that seem very much out of control. Big emotions, of course, the sorrow, the pain, the ache, the longing, the guilt, regret, and also sometimes relief, depending on the situation, or sometimes some sort of a release for some people. And I think something we don't talk about a lot is like the difference between like grief and mourning. And some people don't even know if there's a difference, but I like to kind of educate about this too, because when we talk about grief is kind of like the constellation of the thoughts and the feelings on the inside. It's like the things going on inside. And then mourning is what we think of as kind of this outward expression of those thoughts and feelings, or like grief gone public. And both are so essential to helping support a griever. And so when we start thinking about like, well, what am I going through, and what are the people around me going through, reminding everybody that we want to support grief and we want to support mourning. And those are both essential components to be able not only to have space for the internal stuff, but to also create space for the external. So a great beginning question is like, how are you expressing the internal and how are you expressing the mourning? And if we can start there, that kind of gives us a leaping off point.
Yeah, I actually didn't know the difference between the two until today. So I feel like mourning, because it's more outward, does it have more to do with a sense of community?
Well, it's allowing those emotions to have a place to go. So I wouldn't even say it has to involve a community, although it could. Of course, it can be posting a tribute on social media, having a memorial service where people can come. You two might know, and those of you listening may have attended. I do a monthly memorial service on Instagram where I read the names of all our beloveds who've transitioned. And so, yes, public things, community things can be mourning, but mourning can also be doing rituals in your own space. It can be lighting a candle in the morning with your beloved, or having a memory jar where you drop off an index card with a memory on it each day.
Oh,
So
I love that.
mourning can be in community, but it can also be in private. So it doesn't really have to be one or the other.
Gotcha. I would like for you to speak to a little bit of both of those areas, because grief and mourning are different. For listeners that are just finding out the difference between the two, what would you say is the most important sort of areas to keep in mind for both of those points when they're experiencing it or expressing it?
Well, sure. The number one thing really is if you are experiencing grief right now, is to be very kind and gentle and supportive with yourself. If I could give any griever one gift, it would be the gift of a self-compassion practice. Because what we know about grief, and particularly this kind of grief, is that we can be very hard on ourselves or judgmental about ourselves, about anything we're doing, grieving or mourning. So when you are talking to yourself and thinking about how you're grieving and what you're doing, to really treat yourself with as much kindness as your soulmate would be giving you. about things, because very quickly our grief can turn a little judgmental, or we can start asking, am I doing this wrong? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it properly? I'm putting that in quotation marks if you're not watching, if you're listening, because we need to be very kind that this is a massive upheaval, and that anything we are experiencing is valid, it's profound, it's real. And while other people in society may try to minimize or invalidate what you're going through, that's the last thing I want any griever doing for themselves. So one thing, the number one thing, is to validate your own grief, allow your experience to be whatever it is, and do your darndest to not let that judgmental voice come in and kind of sabotage your own grief. That's a very important thing, regardless of where you are in your grief.
That is really helpful. And I love when you mentioned, think about how your beloved would treat you. Think about what they would want, because that becomes so clear to me. When I think about the loss in terms of Bodhi, he wouldn't want me to feel despair or down on myself, self-blame, guilt. I know that he would want me to celebrate him and honor his legacy. And so that's a very good confirmation of the part I think I did do right in the grief stage.
Exactly. It's a powerful question for every griever. And, nobody else can answer it, right? But what does your beloved want for you? What does Penny want for you? What does Bodhi want for you? What does Arnie want for me? And when you ask yourself that question, you know it. You know it deep in your gut. You know it deep in your heart. And when you can kind of answer that for yourself, it really helps reinforce how to tend to your grief. Because we've got to find ways to tend to our grief, to nurture our grief. And even if we find it hard to do that for ourselves, we can lean on our beloveds. It's a great time to lean on our soulmate pets and let them help us. They can keep helping us, even if they're not earthside. And that's a really powerful question to start giving you some guidance about how to tend to your own grief.
I love how you said it wasn't a linear process too, because I don't think I'm the only person who's heard about the 5 stages of grief. And so when people ask me like how I'm doing, and I'm thinking, am I supposed to be in the denial phase? Well, I don't really think I was ever bargaining, and I'm just in my own head about how I'm supposed to process this versus just actually feeling and letting myself have that grace to feel that and move through it.
Yeah, so the 5 stages of grief is super popular in pop culture, a very common thing a lot of people know about, and most grief experts don't use it at all in any kind of grief work.
Of course.
Bless Dr. Kubler-Ross, a pioneer, and her work groundbreaking and awesome. I take nothing away from her. It's just there's a lot of reasons why that model doesn't really fit for grievers. Part of it's because a lot of that research came out of a studies for people who were terminally ill, so they were grieving that part of things, but not for people who are like grieving a person. So the 5 stages of grief caught on as kind of a pop culture phenomenon, but it's not a framework that most grief professionals I know even use or entertain, and I don't use it with my clients. There's actually way more interesting frameworks we can use to talk about grief. So that is just something that all of those emotions may or may not appear in anyone's individual grief experience. But the tricky thing about that, what I think it's done for people, is it's given this linear idea. Well, first I do this, first I get angry, and then I do this, and then I have acceptance, right? Which is such a tricky word. And a lot of people call me and I ask people when they want to work with me, we do a consultation. I say, talk about kind of, what they're hoping for from our work together. And so many people say the word acceptance. And I say, well, what does acceptance look like for you? Because I think it's a word that a lot of people have internalized. Like, I need to feel acceptance at the end. And you know what? I kind of like to take the pressure valve off and not have to even really be in acceptance. This is a very hard thing to accept, that this has happened. And grief, in my view, we must learn to adjust to this impact of this earthside absence. We have to find a way to integrate it into our lives. But the idea of like having to accept it for some people is so much pressure. So I also find the word acceptance in the 5 stages really challenging for many people I work with. So if you want, Laura, you can just kind of throw that out as a framework you need to follow. Feel free.
I love that. I would love to hear what more applicable frameworks are, because I think that's just such a, oh my God, it's so misleading. And also like the timing, like how quickly people expect you to get over it and move on. It's just like another thing that keeps, I feel like for the first week people are like asking, and then it's just like you're expected to go back to normal. And that's just definitely not the case in my experience.
Yeah, get over it is one of those phrases, or even get like through it is something that's really tricky for me too. I like to say the phrase, we move with our grief, we move with it, because I find the idea of like moving on or getting through, like when we get through something or move through something, we get to some other place. And I don't know what place we're trying to get to or get through. So I mostly say we move with the grief. We move with the grief.
I like that so much better because it's not like, okay, I'm done. You are continuing to honor your loved one through different phases of your life, and the love they gave you transforms through you and through the actions you take and through the way you remember them, the way you change to show their impact on you. So I don't think that Bodhi will ever leave my life or my mind or my heart. And moving with it gives me permission to be okay with that and go through all of the stages of my life still with him, even though he's not here physically.
That's it. That's exactly it. That's why I like to say move with it. I'll give you a starting point too, Laura, and anyone else who's interested. I like the framework, the 6 tasks of mourning. This is William Worden's kind of theory, but adapted actually by Alan Wolfelt. I can send you a link about that. But the idea of the 6 tasks of mourning is a framework I just really enjoy. And the first task is acknowledging the reality that this loss has happened. The second is moving toward the pain of the loss. The third is continuing your relationship with your beloved through different means. The fourth is adjust your self-identity, because of course identity is a huge piece of my work. The fifth is searching for meaning or discovering meaning. And the sixth is to continue to receive support from others. So those are the 6 tasks, which I find way more applicable to most grievers that I work with than the 5 stages.
Are they supposed to happen in order or no? It's kind of
nothing in grief needs to happen in any order.
Okay.
It's all just
Thank
going
you
on
for
and on
saying
and
that.
around and round and round. It's all over the place. No, because some days some days are different than others, and it all just
Yeah.
bounces around, and it's like pinball.
It really is like that because some days it hits you out of nowhere and it's very intense. And some days I can remember and smile, and it really is a huge spectrum.
Yeah.
You had talked about anticipatory grief,
Mhm.
and before I met you, I had never heard of this term before. Can you speak a little bit on anticipatory grief and how we can manage it?
Well, that could be a whole separate hour for us
Right?
on the podcast. There's so much to say about anticipatory grief. And I know anyone who's listening that has experienced it has a visceral feeling right now about how hard that was. Anticipatory grief is a very challenging roller coaster. It is a real up and down. And of course, there are things about anticipatory grief that are similar to post-loss grief symptoms, but there are things about anticipatory grief that are quite different. In anticipatory grief, we are struggling with uncertainty. We don't know how or when things are going to change. We don't know how bad it's going to get. We have a lot of fear. We might be afraid of what's going to happen. We might be very hypervigilant, worrying when the bad thing is going to happen. We're probably feeling very powerless because we don't have control over whatever the disease process is in our beloved's body, or the aging process, or the cognitive decline. We might have anger that this is happening at all. We have lots of dread. Of course, we have sorrow. And looming with all of that is the fact that a lot of times we're going to have to make a euthanasia decision if we're going to choose euthanasia. And we know that if we are in anticipatory grief, that's probably part of it. And so how can we possibly make that decision? And then for many of us, we're thinking, how will my life go on? Am I doing enough? Or do I sometimes just want it to be over because it's so hard? Anticipatory grief sometimes involves a lot of intense caregiving, and we can get a lot of compassion fatigue and caregiver burnout from this constant caregiving, medications and medical visits and all of that. Also, I want to say this, I always really want to validate this, because if there's even one person listening who felt this way, I want to validate you are not alone, and you are not a bad guardian. We sometimes feel very angry at our beloved because they're about to abandon us, and sometimes we try to create distance between them with some of that. We might also feel jealous about people who have healthy animals right now, and of course a lot of self-blame that we can't fix it. So it's a very difficult mix of emotions, and it can lead to a lot of disconnect from our beloveds, which is also really painful because we really want to be there, but we can feel kind of paralyzed, and we have a hard time being present. Not to mention For many people, we might be having some financial ramifications. If we're spending a lot of money on treatments, we might not be able to socialize as much because we might be home supporting our beloved, depending on what's going on. So there's just a lot of other things that go on. So it's very, very hard. And, you know, when I work with you guys, how do we support it? I mean, the three things that I feel need supporting the most in anticipatory grief are, number one, we want to help your relationship with your beloved be solid and beautiful and connected, and that this feels like a time you can really show up and be there for them, because it is a beautiful opportunity to help your beloved through a time of struggle like this. But it can feel so hard. Like, how can I feel more connected? So that's one thing I like to help people with. Also, helping people just navigate the complexity of making medical decisions and treatment choices and euthanasia decisions. I mean, that's a huge focus in the work, is helping people navigate that. I obviously don't make any of those decisions for people. I'm not a veterinarian, but it sometimes is really nice to be able to bounce that off somebody. And then also really helping people take care of themselves. Our self-care is never great in any part of any kind of grief, but particularly in anticipatory grief, it can really go. So we're trying to find ways to help yourself take care of your body, take care of your mind, take care of your spirit, trying to receive help and support from others if you need a break. Sometimes just asking somebody to come over and sit with your beloved for an hour so that you can take a really long shower and get out a good cry in the shower can be like the most loving thing. A lot of people who are experiencing anticipatory grief have a hard time taking care of themselves, so that's a huge focus as well. So for anyone who's going through it, if you're feeling like, wow, this is like the most chaotic experience I've ever had, I want to validate that you are not alone, and reaching out for help, good self-care, and doing your best to connect with your beloved and staying present. Mindfulness, meditation can really help. We got to just keep coming back to the right here, right now, because right here, right now, your beloved is here. And it's a good day because they're here. And unfortunately, with anticipatory grief, we especially get sucked into ruminating and future tripping, which are like grief's two best friends. So really supporting yourself in efforts to stay present is a great place to begin.
I think that was one of the hardest stages for me, the anticipatory part, because I knew he was in pain, and I was fighting between me wanting him to be here longer, and also knowing that he's in pain. And I was like, I don't want him to hurt, but I don't want him to stay because I want him to stay. And that was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make in my life. And I just remember that when I decided, like, okay, I don't want to put him through this pain anymore, he was like not in good shape. He was looking at me and he was like really screaming, and he was like, this medication isn't helping me anymore. I'm not happy. And there was a moment when I was going to the vet with him, and I was still wondering if I should turn around and just go home. And he gave me like 7 minutes of eye contact, very pure eye contact, uninterrupted, and it was so peaceful. And I felt like that was the moment, he was like giving me permission, like, I'm ready. So I remember that really vividly in my heart. And I think that's kind of what helped me get over the guilt. But it was the toughest day to make that decision. And that is before he passed, that was something that I had to start. I had to start the end. So if anyone's listening and has been through that, that is excruciating, and I understand. And I think in a way, I'm really happy that I decided that, because his existence was so beautiful, and I knew that he wanted everything to be just complete. And at the end, he looked at me and he was really happy. He looked really peaceful. And so I think that helped a lot to get that moment with him, and then to offer myself that moment of connection before he left.
That's amazing. Thank you, Bodhi, for that moment.
I know.
What a gift.
He gave me a lot of strength, even though he had none left.
They give us so much.
Yeah.
They are truly remarkable.
Yeah, they really, really are.
Our lives are so much fuller because of them. Beth, I can imagine it's probably a very different process dealing with anticipatory grief for something with clients, with pet parents who know something is coming, the end is coming, versus the things that come kind of out of nowhere, the shock and surprise. I had a very different experience than Yena in that it just happened out of the blue, and it all happened within a span of hours.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like you forget sometimes. I come into the house some days when I'm gone and I'm still calling her name. And it almost like doesn't feel real, and it's a very different experience. But I think giving yourself permission to like understand that all of these experiences are different and it's still valid, whatever we're going through. Like I've had some people in my life who reached out when I told them in the first week or so. And it's been so lovely to hear other people sharing their stories and their experience, because then I know I'm not alone, or I know what I'm feeling is not alone, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like it's something that we don't talk about enough publicly. So this is also why we wanted to do this, because as hard as it is for us to share and talk about it and think about how hard it is, we know there's other people who aren't talking about it. And we have to break that stigma.
And there's so much power in hearing other stories. All my clients who work with me have access. I have a private community just for my clients, and we have a lot of different workshops and other like community events there. And we do workshops focused sometimes on things like sudden loss. So anybody who wants to come that's working with me, whether they've experienced it or not, can come, and we focus on that, or young loss, right, which has a different layer of complexity. And I even bring people together sometimes who've had sort of a non-medical sudden or accidental loss, which is sometimes a little different circumstance. And so there's so much power in connecting with people who've had a similar experience, and there's so much power in hearing other stories. When I do small group work, sometimes I have some people in there who, had a 22-year-old cat with a 3-year cancer battle, and then someone else who has a 6-month-old puppy under a very different circumstance. And initially, some people say, oh, am I going to relate to these other stories? And what is really powerful is that even though there are definite differences, textures, nuances with different types of loss, there's so much universality in how much we love our beloveds, in how grief impacts us in different ways. And it can be really powerful, especially because, some of us in grief, we think, well, the grass is always greener. I would have rather had a 3-year anticipatory period than a sudden loss. And then you learn from someone what that's like, and that may help you reframe your own experience and help with your own comparison feelings. So I totally agree with you. Sharing stories, hearing other people's stories and perspectives can be tremendously healing. It's one of the reasons group work is so excellent, because you get something there that you don't always get just even in one-to-one.
Can we then talk about, because, we've talked about, okay, grief, understanding the grief as individuals who are experiencing it, but how do we support others who are going through that process?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. I love this question, because this is what so many people say is, what do I do? It's like the number one question I get, like if I'm out in the world and someone says, what do you do? Oh, how do I help? Right? So I love this. Number one thing I always like to say is treat this loss as if it were a human family member. Okay?
Yes.
So that is number one. It doesn't matter even if you don't believe that pets are family, if that's not your jam. I don't care. Treat it like you would if it was their partner, or if it was their child, or if it was their mother. Because if you do the things you would normally do for that, you're on the right track. Number one. That's that's your blanket rule. Someone's like, well, is it weird if I send flowers? I'm like, well, as long as they're animal safe flowers, send the flowers. Absolutely, it's not weird. So anything you would normally do if it was a human family member, do those things.
Yes.
Second thing I like to say, you don't need to have any magic words. Okay? People get very anxious. Oh, I have to say the right thing. You don't have to say the right thing. Listen. Just listen without judgment. Listen without giving advice. You don't need to fix it. You can't fix it, okay? You can just hold the safe space. So anytime you're interacting with a griever, take the pressure valve off you to say, quote, the right thing. Although we can talk about some things to say and not to say. We can get to that.
Please.
But
Please.
we will. But you don't need to fix it. You weren't there to fix it. You're there to hold it, okay? Now, here's another one. Put the date in your calendar. The second you find out there's been a loss, find out what date it was and put it in your calendar. And I would like you to set a calendar reminder for yourself every week, and also every month and every year. Go ahead and put that calendar reminder in now, because your friend or family member is going to be thinking about their loss on those milestone anniversaries. They're probably thinking about it on the 14th of every month, or on that 6-month anniversary, and especially that 1-year anniversary. And you might be the only person they hear from on those days. And guess what? Our calendars are so easy to set up a recurring reminder. Go ahead and do that. And it doesn't have to be huge. You can reach out and send a text. You can send a card, whatever you want to do. Acknowledge the milestone dates. Acknowledge the monthly date. That will mean more than you can possibly know. Also, everyone's like, well, what can I do? The second question is, how can I help? That's a nice question, but grievers don't know what they need. Grievers are overwhelmed. So just do something. Do whatever you think the person might need. Send them a DoorDash gift card so they don't have to worry about food, or send food over, send groceries over. If it's the kind of person you can say, hey, can I take your trash bins to the curb next Thursday? Maybe you can offer to walk their surviving dogs, perhaps, if that's comfortable. I mean, just do something, or say, oh, hey, I'm here at Target. Can I pick you anything up? Do you need laundry detergent? And just do things, right? Also creating items for them. People love getting beautiful items that have their animal's portrait on them. Or I love a journal with like the beloved's photo or painting on the cover. A lot of people like to send wind chimes or anything. Just send something with their beloved's face on it. That always feels good. Also, if you have any photos in your phone or any memories, feel free to drop those at any time. Oh, I came across this photo today of Penny, and it just brought back a lot of happy memories, and I wanted to share it with you. Or I was thinking about the time that we went to that park with Bodhi, and just whatever it is, whatever memories you have, or even a story they told you once. You say, oh, I thought of that today, So another big tip, say the beloved's name. Use their beloved's name. Is there any sound better in the world for either one of you than hearing Bodhi or Penny? Doesn't your heart just light up? My favorite word in the English language is Arnie, right? That's why a lot of like from my Instagram, my tip is, use their name when you go to the coffee shop. So when you get your coffee, they say coffee for Arnie, and then the whole room gets to hear Arnie's name, and it's the best thing ever. And grievers are very afraid to like bring it up or like use their name. But when you use someone's name in print or on a call, it feels so good. And how do you do that? You can say, oh, I've been thinking of you and Arnie today, or I've been thinking of you and Penny today, or I want to do something in Bodhi's honor. What would feel good? Yena, that kind of thing. Just use it. Use their name. That really helps. So those are some things I recommend.
The thinking of you text, even just don't worry about saying the right thing. Just saying, I'm thinking of you and Penny. I know how much Penny meant to you. Just the act of reaching out means so much.
Yeah. A lot of people after Bodhi passed did exactly what you said, where they would send me video clips of when they were interacting, when they were looking after him while I was on vacation, or when we had a park day. And it really made me smile just year to year, because it transported me back to that memory. And it was very visceral. It was very visual, and I connected immediately. Also was able to feel how Bodhi impacted so many people and not just myself. And so I can attest to the fact that that is so effective. And after I posted the announcement to Men's Wear Dogs account, hundreds of people shared their own lost story. And this is why I knew that having you on here, Beth, was so important, because every single person that wrote to me had deep, deep love for their pet. It was so apparent. And they really wanted to speak their pet's name. They wanted to memorialize. And I was so grateful that they sent me these messages. And we are so fortunate to have pet grief counselors like you to help us navigate and give us permission and show us that we can act in the ways that we need at the moment to properly grieve and properly move at these stages.
Yeah, my main mantra is, if it feels supportive to your grief, do it. If it does not feel supportive to your grief, don't do it. Very simple. If we listen to that in our hearts, if we do the things that feel supportive, no matter what other people might say or think about it, and if we don't do the things that don't feel supportive, even if an expert recommended it or even if someone else suggested it, we will stay in a much more authentic path for our grief, and we will stay in better alignment with our beloveds, because isn't that how we operated with all of our dogs anyway? We always did the things that they liked and that felt supportive to them, and we tried to avoid doing things that weren't supportive for them. So I'm all about being in alignment as we grieve with how we would do things with our beloveds, as opposed to worrying about external pressure or ideas.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think there are some people that it could be cultural, it could be any other factor, but they sort of try to avoid the grief altogether. grief avoidance. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
When you say cultural, there's also just a lot of things about how we are raised that impact how we grieve and how we mourn.
Yeah.
And if we grew up in a household where we didn't really get a lot of examples of how to grieve, how to mourn, that it was okay to grieve or mourn, a lot of the messages we have received growing up about grief and mourning, even in pop culture and movies, TV, film, a lot of us may think that's what we do. We don't express, we don't show it. And of course, if you grew up in any kind of like stiff upper lip kind of family or don't express emotions, that can compound it. So some people just simply don't feel comfortable sharing any emotions, especially grief. But what you're talking about there, I think, is sort of when people are trying to avoid things, and that is a response, by the way, to overwhelm. This is what we do when we get overwhelmed. So we might busy ourselves 24/7 or
Yeah.
get really distracted. We might numb out with substances or activities that aren't supportive. We might really push away, doing certain rituals or doing certain activities or thinking about certain memories. There's all kinds of ways that avoidance coping is the fancy word for it can look. But at the end of the day, it's an overwhelm response, and we are trying to keep ourselves safe is really what it is. Listen, distraction gets a bad rap in grief. And it is true that we want to make time to sit with our feelings, to allow our feelings to move through us. And that can be really hard to do, especially for some kinds of people. So I don't always like to say, don't distract yourself, just sit with your feelings, because actually distraction serves a function in grief. Our brains need a break from the constant overwhelm of grief. And so if you go out and watch a funny movie or you go have coffee with a friend and you laugh about things, that's really nice, kind of taking a beat and not thinking about the thing for a minute. So we always want to be careful when we are too negative about distraction, because like healthy distraction can be really, really great. But it is that kind of avoidance when you're really distracting yourself 24/7 and you don't want to look at it or face it at all. The problem with it is that you stuff your grief down and then it comes out sideways. And then you can find yourself kind of unloading or unleashing at other people in inappropriate times because you have so much that's been stuffed down. So you really have to work to kind of find a balance of making time for your feelings and expressing your feelings. But here's the deal. Grief expressions look different on everybody. Grief expressions for some people can look like crying in the fetal position in bed, and grief expression for someone else might look like singing karaoke. And both of those are valid grief expressions. So we also don't want to limit, like, here's how I have to look while I grieve. And so it's always a real balance of like keeping ourselves protected so we're not just in it all the time in our brains, accepting that our brain is also going to kind of titrate the grief in a little bit. So, some people in the beginning say, oh, am I avoiding? Because I'm just not getting a lot of like grief feelings all the time. You might not be avoiding, you might be numb, you might be in shock, or your brain might be trying to protect you, and that's okay too. So I think it's something, certainly if you notice like, I'm just avoiding everything about my grief and I'm stuffing it down and never making time, like that's a good question to ask yourself. But I also just don't like people to get too worried about distraction, because distraction can be helpful to us in grief too. So it's a balance on that one.
Yeah, sometimes it's just needed,
Yes.
like a break.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
What about moving forward? Earlier, you talked about identity and how sometimes our identity is so meshed with our beloved soul pet. How do you help guide people to rediscover their identity as they're moving forward?
Yeah, it's another hour we could spend on
Okay.
that. And that is, I mean, look, that's a huge part of my work, right? Because so many people, myself included, have this feeling when our beloved transitions, well, who am I now? Who am I if Arnie is not Earthside? Who am I now if I'm not a dog mom? And what now? And what next? And frankly, who cares? That's where many people that I meet, that's where they are. And, I think it's kind of a heavy lift in the beginning to worry about anything about your identity, to tell you the truth. We've got a lot of other pressing things to support. So I don't ask any griever to understand who exactly they're going to be in a year when grief is first beginning, because there's usually so many other things going on. But in early days, the thing I like to teach people to do, one of the things, is to just keep leaning into their relationship with their beloved. Because the gifts, the guidance, the lessons, the teachings, the wisdoms that your beloved has instilled in you are in you. You have them. Those are seeds that have been planted. And so to be thinking about how are you going to carry all those gifts, guidance, lessons, and teaching forward? What collaborations do you want to do with your beloved as you move into this next part of your life? What are the two of you going to work on together? And going back to that idea, what does your beloved want for you? And how can I take the next best step to get there or to be there? That's in the earlier days. That's a way, because you're staying connected to your beloved. You're having those conversations with them. Hey, what do we want to do? How do we want to make an impact? What can I continue to do on your behalf? That's a starting point, because it's like all the things that you like to do with your beloved don't necessarily have to end just because they're not earthside. But we might have to translate how to do those things in a new way or experience those in a new way. So to me, it's not like we're doing a hard reset and abandoning everything we did before. The first question is, how do we take from before into now? And what might it look like? And then I do a lot of work with people about values. Who am I? What's important to me? What are my values? What are my beloved's values? And how can I embrace those and live those and make choices that are aligned with those? And then looking at other pieces of life. There's a lot of areas of life that are impacted by grief, like we talked about earlier, and starting to just sort of look at each of those areas and how might I elevate what I'm doing? How might I discover my passions? Another trick about identity is that grief is a great time to learn something new. Our brains are really hungry for that kind of thing. And learning new things, especially things that have like a process or a beginning, middle, end, or kind of a finish line, that can feel really nice in grief. So sometimes one place to begin on identity is there's something you've always wanted to learn or do or try that you haven't yet discovered. And that can be a great leaping off point. A lot of my clients start learning a new language, or they start learning a musical instrument. Some of my clients even learn musical instruments to play tributes for their beloved, which is so cool.
I love this.
It's so great. So, learning something new, maybe taking a class. A lot of my clients, I love to encourage them to do art. Visual art is a great thing to do during grief. Pottery or any kind of painting. Of course, a lot of my clients like to do like custom paint by number paintings or the diamond paintings. They can do things to make beautiful tributes for their beloveds. But things like that with a process and things with our hands are also really helpful for our brain on grief. So I kind of like to start there. And then, as we evolve in our grief and as we kind of move out of some of the more acute symptoms that can be really intense in the beginning, we can get into more ideas about how to become who we are going to become.
I really love the creative outlet to celebrate our loved ones. One of the things that I did after Bodhi passed is I created a mini shrine for him in my bedroom, and I made a small Bodhi statue. And it's sitting right next to, some photos of him, his ashes. And it's something that I look at every day because it's right there. And it really helps me to connect with him in a very daily way because it's like in my space all the time. And so I actually spoke about this somewhere online, and then people started to share pictures of their shrine with me. And it was so beautiful because you could see the personality of the human and the pet and how it sort of combines. So I really loved seeing that, and you just confirmed this is such a healthy way to navigate the loss and celebrate at the same time, and our brains are ready for it, and it's going to help so many different parts of us.
Absolutely. Altar spaces are one of my favorite things to have my clients do. And in fact, most of my clients, I encourage them to keep their altars up, year round. But many people love to like decorate for the holidays. They do different.
That's so sweet.
Yes, and they, because I always say, like, if you always, bought your dog a Valentine's treat, go ahead and continue to buy the treat. Put it on the altar for the month of February. If you always did a costume for Halloween, let's decorate for Halloween. Many of my clients love to decorate in the style of an ofrenda for Dia de los Muertos, and year round. And a lot of about my memorial Christmas tree idea. Many of my clients have Christmas trees that are just for their beloveds with ornaments just featuring their beloveds. That can go on their altar as well. Unless it's a huge one. The huge ones are fabulous. So I love having the altar. And the reason I love having an altar that you continue to sort of mix up and tend to is because you are still then nurturing. You're still doing a physical hands-on act of caring. So even when you go in and just rearrange the altar or add something new or put up some twinkle lights for a holiday, you are still doing that nurturing piece that for many of us, it feels so hard. How do we keep doing that? And I love tending to an altar space because you kind of get that physical act of caring caring for them as well. And of course, it's a great place for daily connection. So I love that you have one. And I encourage everybody listening, and listen, if you haven't made one, even if it's been 5 years, you can go ahead and make one today. There's no time limit on creating an altar space in your house. So go ahead and make one and send us the pictures if you do.
Yes, that alone is going to be such a healing exercise.
Yeah.
So beautiful.
You've shared how we can help others who are going through this grieving process. Are there any things that you would recommend, just general blanket statements, what not to do?
Well, I don't want to scare anybody about what not to say, because it's better to say something than nothing, but I will give you a couple things to avoid. How's that?
Okay.
Number one, the worst thing is to say nothing at all. So if you know someone has just gone through a loss, please don't go up and say, hey, how's that sourdough starter going? No, acknowledge their loss. You're not going to upset them. You can just say, hey, I heard about Bodhi and I'm thinking of you, or how was today? The worst thing is to say nothing at all. But then others, some horrible things to do. Don't say anything that sounds like advice. Please don't give people advice. No one's asking you a question, so don't offer your advice. Please don't say, how did they die? What happened? And people don't typically like to talk about that. That's rude. Never say, don't cry, Bodhi wouldn't like that. Oh. Don't ever say, you knew you'd outlive them. Or, did you try this kind of treatment or that? Because that worked for my dog. So did you think about trying that?
Oh,
never,
God.
never tell somebody, be strong for the kids, or be strong for your partner. Never tell somebody you need to keep busy, or why aren't you happy that they're in a better place? Please don't advise anyone to get another one or adopt. Please don't send anybody pictures of puppies if they are going through a loss. If they would like your opinion on adoptable animals, they will ask for it. Please don't tell anyone they're overreacting or taking it too hard. Please don't say something like, oh, she had a nice long life. That also feels very unsupportive. Also, please never use any phrase that includes the word should, at least, or just, like you shouldn't feel so sorry for yourself, or at least it wasn't a kid. Please don't ever use should, at least, or just. And also, please don't say the phrase, it's not healthy to, blah, blah, blah. Please don't say that either. Those would be some things that I recommend nobody say to a pet
Can
loss
we apply
griever.
those to life in general? I think those are really good tips just for
We should
general
turn that into a
communication.
sound.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Wow. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about our other pets, our surviving pets, because there are a lot of people out there, both Yena and I included, that we're multi-pet households. I have 5 other dogs, and I can tell you it's not just me who felt it. There is a significant difference in their behavior. If they were there to experience it, they see it. I think they carry that grief too. Is there anything you can share about other pets and how we support them?
Absolutely. First of all, anyone who has lived with surviving animals has observed that our surviving animals do grieve. And so, of course, they do. They are grieving. There's been a big change, and they're in a house full of people who are grieving, or with someone who's grieving. So they are going to feel that. It's interesting. There's not like amazing research on this, unfortunately, but we do know that different animals experience grief differently. And so you may notice, if you have multiple surviving animals, that some are really changing their behaviors and others are not changing their behaviors at all. And that's okay. It's kind of like people. We have different expressions of grief. However, in general, sometimes we see searching behaviors. Sometimes we see new territory kind of things happening. Sometimes we hear vocal expressions. So if you see any of that, I always be very reassuring, very loving when we observe those behaviors. Also, many people are afraid to say their beloved's name to surviving animals, thinking it will upset them. But quite the opposite usually proves to be true. My cat Zelda transitioned a couple of years ago, and so now we talk about her with my current cats. And so, are you thinking of Zelda? And their ears perk up, and they seem to like to hear her name. So don't be afraid to talk to your surviving animals about the animal who's transitioned, and tell them stories, tell them memories, talk about their relationship, engage with them. Also, don't be afraid to speak with them about your grief. Tell them what you're going through. And most importantly, reassure them. Say, hey, I know things might feel a little funky in here right now. I know things have really shifted, and you're grieving and I'm grieving, and you're okay. I got your back. I'm right here for you. Nothing bad is happening to you in this moment. Really think about reassurance as kind of your headline word for them. I do also recommend, if you're seeing a lot of changes or you have any concerns, please just take them into a veterinary professional. Sometimes there are instances where animals, just like we do, have physical side effects. So I want to make sure that if anyone's wondering if it's weird to take them in for a checkup, just take them in just to make sure, and let your veterinarian know this loss has happened, and that just just in case. I always recommend that. Also, many grievers have lots of big feelings about surviving animals sometimes, particularly if the quote favorite animal is the one who transitioned. And I want to normalize and validate. It's okay to have a favorite. I want to normalize and validate. You might feel some resentment or some comparison or some jealousy. When Arnie died, if I could have snapped my fingers and traded him with Zelda, I would have. And that's not because I'm a horrible person or a terrible guardian. It's just because the relationships were really different.
Yeah.
But I didn't get to choose that. But what I did do is I really worked on my relationship with Zelda. I spent a lot of one-on-one time with her. One thing you can do is introduce something new. So maybe a new kind of training or a new kind of game or a new kind of activity with your surviving animals. And very often we see those relationships with our surviving animals blossom in different ways. Sometimes we even see them taking on the traits of our beloved who has transitioned, which is very mysterious, but that does happen. So also keep an open mind and heart about the potential for those relationships, even if you're struggling with feelings of resentment or comparison or anger, because our surviving animals can really surprise us in this situation. So if you can keep your heart open to that, highly recommend.
Thank you. That was super valuable.
Grief work is life work, really. When we really get in here about how do we support ourselves, how do we support others, it really is, these are all things that are applicable to life as well. And I think that's a really powerful thing. It's one of the reasons I really advocate for people to seek support in their grief, because you learn so many things about yourself. You learn so many tools, so many strategies that you can apply to your whole life. When we get in there working on guilt and shame and regret, which so many people struggle with, we're learning how to support that in all parts of life, not just in our loss. So grief work to me is life work and life affirming work. Yeah, this is good life advice, not just grief advice.
Yes. And the most beautiful thing is we can show up for others in the right way as well, because we're learning how to navigate it. And then because we know how it feels, we can have compassion for other people that are going through it and be able to hold the right kind of space for them.
Yeah. And that's how we change this. That's how we change the stigma. That's how we change the culture.
Yes.
That's how we get to my vision. I hope by the time I'm off this plane that we can not call it pet loss grief. You notice how funny it is? We always have to put grief at the end of it because we have to remind people that pet loss is a grief experience. We never say like child loss grief or widow grief because we know that those experiences are grief experiences. But with pet loss grief, we always put the grief on to like remind people when there's a pet loss, there's grief. So my dream is that if we keep continuing to support others, to talk about this, to break stigma, to make grievers feel less ashamed and more supported, that we will all know someday this is as valid and profound a loss as any other experience.
And you are spearheading this movement, and we're right there behind you.
Yes.
Let's go.
Oh my goodness.
With that, thank you, Beth, for joining us. This was one of the most valuable hours, I think, of my life, and we learned so much. You gave us a lot of permission to grieve individually in the ways that we need to. I think it really helps to hear from a professional that is okay to do. We often don't give that permission to ourselves. So you've given that to us as well as all of our listeners today. So we can't thank you enough for that. You can follow Beth on Instagram at Honoring Our Animals. And to get more info on Beth's services, to work with her, which I highly encourage, please go to honoringouranimals.com.
And Beth, you have a book coming out. Can you share a little bit about that? Because I would love for everyone to check that out when it's available.
Yes. So my book is called Honoring Our Animals, 365 Meditations for Healing After Pet Loss. It's a beautiful book, and I'm really proud of it. It's kind of like having me in your ear every single day. I have short, digestible meditations, and in each meditation, you're going to find different things. You're going to be finding support for grief symptoms like guilt and anger and sadness and disorientation. You're also going to be finding entries about self-care, self-compassion, and self-discovery for that identity piece. You're also going to be finding connection ideas, ways that you can continue to feel connected and close with your beloved even after their transition. And every single entry has a very short meditation to think about, plus an invitation. So that's an action step you can actually take each day, because one of our biggest questions is like, what do I do? What do I do in my grief? So I try to give you little things you can do to support all these aspects of your grief. And there's a lot of creative ideas. There's out of the box kind of ideas. I'm bringing all kinds of different tools and tips to empower you. I also have a feelings wheel where you can kind of really look at different feelings you might be experiencing and different exercises to go with those. And one of my favorite parts of the book is the index, because if you wake wake up and you're like, I'm just having a day where I'm feeling so much jealousy. I just want to dig into jealousy. You can go to the back of the book and read the entries about jealousy. Or I just want to do art today about my beloved. You can go to some art entries. So there's a lot of different ways to use the book, either reading it day to day as a part of your daily practice or jumping around to whatever feels supportive. So the book drops on June 3rd. I would love for anyone to order it. You can find it anywhere you like to buy books, your local indie bookstore, bookshop.org, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you like books. I hope you love it.
We are so excited about this book launch, and I love how you structured it so that it is easily digestible for people that are overwhelmed, that are grieving, that can't dedicate hours and hours on a book to read. And it's also like a back and forth. You have nuggets of wisdom that you give them, and they get to express themselves, express their love, express their hardship, whatever they're feeling. So I know this is going to be an incredible resource for our listeners. So thank you for writing that book with all of the people in mind and all of the animals in mind as well.
It was my pleasure, and I can't wait for it to go live in the world and keep helping everyone.
Thank you
I
so
love
much,
it.
Beth. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and just giving us space to share our stories and our experiences. It really means so much, and I hope it's helped some people here today listening also validate that their experiences are real and we're all here for each other.
And thank you, Bodhi, and thank you, Penny.
Yes!
Yeah.
And thank you, Arnie, for inspiring Beth to become an
Yes.
incredible healer.